AI voice stating that the call is recorded.
The call is being recorded. Do you accept? No.
Do you accept the charges? And we're going to get to that point where Zoom is essentially going to take over mass telecommunications. It's effectively going to become like 1995, just with video calling.
I mean, I get why they put it. I get why they put it there. You don't want people like recording you without your knowledge. Like that's kind of creepy. But I mean, who uses Zoom not knowing that they're going to be recorded? Like I don't know. Like
I mean, it's all being recorded anyway. But I mean,
exactly.
It depends on how paranoid the rabbit hole you want to go.
Yeah.
By the way, on the paper tiger thing, have you seen The Art of Self-Defense?
Mm-hmm.
Oh my God, I watched like that and Paper Tiger within the space of the week. I'm like, yeah, this pretty much catches the breath of martial arts.
Man, when we watched, I held like a movie night for my adult students, and we watched The Art of Self-Defense.
The adult students.
Yeah, no, not the kids, but so let me just say this: a bunch of my students watched it, and they were like, "Have you seen this?" And I was like, "No," and they were like, "You will love this." I'm like, "Okay." So we watched it, and like they were watching my facial expressions the entire time we were watching it, and I loved it in so many ways. I mean, I think The Art of Self-Defense did many things really well, but the most important thing that I think it did really well was it basically took all of the insane things that actually happen in martial arts schools, and it's like
in America, very specifically in that particular setting of like the strip mall, like club, and like people wanting to join, and the guy's got an office and he's got stuff on the wall that people don't really know too much about. He's preying on people's ignorance. And like, what does he really do outside of teaching classes? Right. So I mean, stuff we've
all of the weird cult-like activity that happens, the sexual abuse, the mental psychological abuse, I mean, it really sucks. Don't get me wrong. Like I hate that is reality, but nobody wants to talk about it. And I put up on Facebook, I think after I watched it, and I was like, this is amazing. And I got a lot of hate from different people. It was horrible. It's not what I thought it was going to be. It painted martial arts in such a horrible light. And I'm like, these are real things that we have to deal with as martial arts instructors. Like, we can't just say, no, that's not real. I think it did a really good job.
In the age of Cobra Kai and like everyone being like, you know, lionizing these old 80s stars who didn't really ever participate in the things that their media has kind of represented to mass amount of people, for them to join said thing, and actually seeing the repercussions of it to a degree, because like this is like what Cobra Kai is actually like. This is like what it actually is. Like, there's, of course, Sony's not going to pay for like this type of a movie, but like, yeah, that's what that place would be.
Right.
I think it's hilarious in it feels like if it's a little off the mark from what their stamp would be, but it'd be like if the Coen brothers made Karate Kid.
Yeah.
And yeah, I guess this is our mini corner on talking about
no, I thought it was great. I thought it was absolutely phenomenal. The way that they, that martial arts instructors or martial arts schools in general will prey on insecurities to try to get students, and then they, that insecurity never really goes away. They just kind of put, slowly as you progress, your insecure self gets put in charge of other people, and you end up just being this insecure person with power, and you take over and you're just a bully. You know, some of the biggest bullies I've encountered in my life have been martial arts instructors. Yeah, I mean, like that's a reality.
And mass media not being able to really show that in a realistic way is really unfortunate. But
Hmm.
anyway,
Yeah.
this isn't exactly the corner. This is where we're exactly going to go. But we're kind of freewheeling it tonight.
There you go.
Good morning, good afternoon. I guess we're 5 minutes in, so we should probably officially get started. But good morning, good afternoon, good evening, folks. Welcome to Karate Without Belts. I'm John, and I am joined by a longtime collaborator, first time on the podcast officially, Mr. Dan Bernardo.
Yes, finally. I
Finally.
feel my heart is twice the size right now. Feeling good about life, and
Having a
I'm
large
honored.
heart's not actually a healthy
Not
thing.
not a good thing. I'm about to die in about 3 minutes, but it was great. It was a great 3 minutes of being on the podcast
I don't
with you,
know.
John. No, thank you so much for having me. It's an honor.
No, we've kind of done a version of this on live streams, some which have done really well, some which have been well, let's say we had a really great conversation. We're just not sure everyone heard it. But
Not at first, anyway.
not at first. So, sir, how are you?
I'm doing well. I'm doing well.
How has the training been recently?
Training's been good. I've been slowing down a little bit, trying to just focus on um, little things, conditioning, um, endurance, stuff like that. Not so much technically based of a focus recently. You know, I think that as much as we should practice technique and things, I think our health and our endurance and our ability to prevail health wise is just as important. So I try to make sure that I make some time to focus on that.
Yeah, there's something of a common myth that if you just do the martial art, that's going to kind of remedy all issues you have, which I mean, it just isn't true.
Hmm. Hmm.
And in some ways it is, in some ways it isn't. Um, but there's running 12 kilometers is not the same as getting your kata in for the day. But doing bag work is not going to be the same as getting your internal work in and stuff like that. So
Hmm.
yeah,
Hmm.
I definitely get that.
Yeah, yeah. I think there has to be some balance. I mean, your technique should be good. It should be efficient. But if you're overwhelmed, then your ability to run 12 kilometers is really going to help because I mean, if you're overwhelmed and you can't withstand someone three times the size of you pinning you up against the wall or down on the ground, your technique is not going to do anything. So definitely don't neglect your physical fitness.
Yeah, unfortunately that goes on far too much in circles we run in, especially nutrition wise, and unfortunately people like to get into some harder stuff, which is really, really scary.
Hmm.
But
Hmm.
yeah, I this week has been kind of a not so. I did a 12K probably about a couple days ago, but this
That's
week has
awesome.
just been yeah. I mean, it was fun, and it was actually it felt good. Like it's one of those things where it's like it goes in stages, where it's
Hmm.
like, and I feel like karate doesn't exactly do it does, but it doesn't like any workout. You get ready, you do the thing, you kind of get drained from it, and then you have that weird endorphin high afterwards.
Hmm.
Um,
Hmm.
but that endorphin high is much. I've always felt it's much different in karate.
Yeah. 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 And then you usually get more chances to relax and recoup when you're training in karate rather than if you're going on a long hike or you're going on a run or something like that. I'm not a runner. My endurance is horrible, but I know that when I have ran, like when I did wrestling in high school, that was probably the best shape I had ever been in my life because we ran just so much, and I've never experienced anything like that in
In wrestling.
the in karate world. Yeah. Wrestling. I mean, we ran more than we wrestled. Like that was just.
That's interesting.
Oh yeah. I mean,
I wouldn't have expected that.
yeah, man. I mean, my first day we ran like, I don't know, 5 miles or something like that. It was insane, and I thought I was going to die. But again, it all goes back to that endurance thing. Somebody's trying to smash you into the mat, and for minutes at a time, and you have to endure that. And the best way to develop that is to run. We'd run outside, and then we'd go into the gym and we'd run circles. I mean, my high school colors were blue and gold. I remember the floor was yellow and the walls were blue, and they were my least favorite colors.
That's also
Forever.
like a weird. Mine were red and white. So just thinking of something that's just blue around you, and then just what like gold on the floor. It's just like that's not gonna cover up stains. Neither's red, neither's white. But
Right? Yeah. True. My instructors, when he lived in Puerto Rico, his floor was concrete to his dojang, and it was painted red. And I remember him telling me like, "Oh yeah, one time it was painted green, and I had to keep painting it to cover up the blood spots. So we just ended up painting it red." I was like, "Oh, that makes sense." He yells at me. He doesn't. I have padded floors. He doesn't like my padded floors.
well, easier to keep the blood stains out because less blood.
I know, and I've got kids that roll around and throw each other off the floor, and it's much better for stopping little kids from getting concussions off of concrete floors. But
You have concrete under that though.
yes.
That feels like every American building is like that. It's just
It's kind of ridiculous, yeah. It's
here.
either that, like you either have concrete with like a raised floor, like people will raise a wooden floor and then put
Right.
mats on it, or they'll just have a wood floor. Like classically in Tungsten, wood floor is your desired floor. So they'll raise it up, like a 2-inch spacer or something. They'll raise it up and they'll put a plywood floor or a hardwood floor or something. But that's kind of the norm.
No,
Now, of course, it's mats. The blue and red puzzle mats are the norm, I think, nowadays. But
if you have really thick ones, I think they're okay. But if you have like the puzzle like easily taken apart, easily broken down type deal, it's just it might not be great. But
I have puzzle mats, and they're not amazing. I'm thankful for them, but I wish that I had. I wish I had better mats, but I mean, whatever.
well,
It
at least you're
works
not.
for what I do.
But they're meant to be static. They're not meant to be taken up and put down and stuff like that.
Right. True. Yeah.
There's the places I've worked where it's like they constantly have to move around the mats and stuff like that, and they're just old, worn out. When I lived in, I guess I can say this now. When I lived in Yoron, the karate guys had like the really worn because all their training gear was just old, and there wasn't any, but it was just like these mats were probably from the 80s.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's not that they were bad. It's just that they had to put them because we were working in a community center, and they had to put them out there because like they were doing martial arts, and yeah, I mean it's smart enough, but it actually made the floor more slippery. It made it harder to fall down. It made it easier to fall down.
Yeah,
So they
because the
wanted to
mats
do
move.
yeah.
Yeah.
So
And I mean, they break down. I mean, what are you going to do? Even mine, I've had them for, I think, 5 years now, the current set that I have. I'm already starting to have to replace them and move them around because they're already starting to break down.
yeah, that's why I'm happy I don't have a school right now.
I mean, I may in the future just get rid of them and be like, all right, everybody, we're just going to be on concrete. But we'll see.
Get the really moldy, crappy carpet over the concrete just to put something there, and that way no one's happy. So everyone just gets rug burns on their feet all day.
Yeah, that's right. That's the best way.
Yeah, but one thing you brought up to me and I felt was really relevant to me, particularly because this is my day job.
Yeah.
but also, the thing that I love to do, and there's a constant analogy that's been made between what I do professionally and this, and it's the two
Hmm.
things I've only ever done from a teaching perspective.
Yeah.
And you brought up the idea of linguistics and martial arts having something in common. Now, I've kind
Hmm.
of avoided this topic to a degree,
Sure.
and I'll get into why that is later. Um, but
Yeah.
but you were talking about something. I feel free to go wherever you want to go with this.
Okay.
But you were talking about something a little earlier about kind of the relation between linguistics and martial arts, and I'm just gonna let you take it away and kind of go lead us down this path,
Okay.
sir.
Yeah. So this was brought up to me a few weeks ago. Well, maybe a little bit more than a few weeks ago. But I had a good friend who told me he was having a conversation with somebody, and they were talking about forms and let's say the applications of these forms, right? And the one guy basically said that if you do the forms enough, the applications will become known to you. And I thought
Hmm.
this was very interesting because and then I used language as an example. And so I basically said, okay, I'm going to teach you a couple phrases in Italian, right? So we went through a couple phrases, ciao a tutti, come va. We did it just a couple things in Italian, and I made him repeat. And then we did it over and over again. I made him repeat it over and over and over again. And then after he sounded good, right? He used the right inflection, right? Oh, ciao a tutti, come va, right? He sounded really good. And then I said, okay, now, what does that mean? And he had no clue what it meant because I didn't tell him what it meant. All I did was teach him how to say it. And so I thought this was very interesting in that, you did the form over and over and over again. You perfected it. It was easy. You perfected this form. Why don't you know what you're saying? Because you don't know what the words mean. You have to learn what the words mean first, and then you can decipher what the sentence might mean. So then it got me into thinking about martial arts in general. We basically do this. We learn um, a sentence or a paragraph, and we practice it over and over and over and over again. And then we'll learn like simple responses. So somebody will ask, come va? And so you respond with bene, e tu? Or you respond with oh, sei stanco, or you respond with molto bene, or you respond with bellissimo, or whatever, right? There's different ways of responding to this one question, and I felt that this was very similar to one step sparring, right? Where somebody
Hmm.
walks in and they punch you the same way every single time, and you defend it in different ways, and you memorize these ways, but that doesn't necessarily mean that you can go to and carry on a conversation with someone in Italian. And so I think that like sometimes, martial in so many ways is like a language where like if you have
Marshall, bye.
maybe uh-oh.
Uh oh. Try to find Marshall. Someone's trying to stop you.
That was weird. That's normally anyway.
It's staying
Yeah,
in.
yeah. I mean, Mark. Let's just say, if I practice karate and somebody else practices, say, Brazilian jiu-jitsu, those are almost two different languages, and
Right.
so we may not be able to carry on a conversation with each other, or maybe they're not two different languages. Maybe they're two different dialects of the same language or something. So we're still going to struggle if we were to get together and fight, quote unquote, right? Or just roll around or just try to do whatever. We may not be able to have a conversation. And I think that in so many ways, it's because we really only learn phrases, we memorize phrases, we memorize responses to specific phrases, but we don't go a whole lot. Some people do, of course. There's live sparring and there's whatever. And there's MMA and there's all these different things that do allow for free conversation. and especially with natives of that language, et cetera, et cetera. But a lot of martial arts schools, we don't do that. We just learn phrases and then we gain this, I don't want to say confidence, but we gain this confidence. I'll use that word. We gain this confidence that we can speak that language when in reality we really can't. I
Well,
don't know if that makes any sense.
that makes sense because, and I speak to this as a language teacher,
Yeah.
because then this makes this ask the question: what's a native speaker of martial arts as opposed to a foreign speaker or someone who is not a native speaker of martial arts?
That's a really good question.
Because and I'll tip my hat here a little because it's something you can see, it's something you can feel, but it's not necessarily something you can really well define,
Mm-hmm.
because native speakers generally are good at speaking their language, good at communicating in their language, good at just being able to use the language, but they're terrible at being able to explain it,
Yeah.
or won't be able to tell you the difference between syntax and verbs, and probably get things wrong from a grammatical and book perspective, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
But they can just do it.
Right.
And
Well, you
so
see
what
that
I
in martial too, a whole lot too, right? Like good
uh,
fighters, good people who, you know that they can defend themselves, you know that they can, destroy people. They could be the most horrible teachers in the world because they can't explain to you why they do it.
well, and then you get this issue of people who are book learning, so to speak,
Right.
people who are shadowing. That's
Mm-hmm.
that's that's a technique that I have a slight issue with.
Okay.
I don't necessarily feel that works all the time, but from a language perspective, shadowing from a karate perspective or from a martial arts perspective is somewhat necessary.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Go back to your Ippon Kumite or a one-step sparring type deal. The idea of, because normally those are always someone's in a front stance with their left foot, they move forward with their right foot, and they move
Mm-hmm.
forward with the right punch, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's normally how people get taught how to speak.
Yes.
And I guess if we're going to use this analogy, the speaking part of the language would be the actual combat. The
Right.
grammar, when the syntax would be the forms,
Mm-hmm.
right? And our
Mm-hmm.
verbs are essentially what bunkai, or what the breakdown of those forms would be. And then kind of more the free conversation is, as you said, the sparring.
Mm-hmm.
Um, to kind of give a visual, not visual, but like a kind of a more filled out version of what this analogy might be.
Yeah.
So in order to teach verbs, right, in order to be able to get people to go or do or say or speak, there's no stative verbs in martial arts. So there's no, you can't be grappling, right? Um, you are grappling or you are not grappling.
Yeah.
Um, you are on the ground or not on the ground. So, language nerds abide. But I think that the native speaker is also someone who is able to naturally just has that natural ability to a degree. So the physical fitness of it comes into to play, but also you get the other side of it where you get a lot of people who are really, really good at the book stuff, but
Mm-hmm.
cannot make any of it come out or work or
Right. Like when I was learning French in high school, I could if I was very good at the phonetics. So like I could sound really French, but I had no clue what I was saying. But I could fake it. I could fake it. If you were just listening to me talk, you would be like, "Wow." But I had no clue what I was saying. I
yeah.
was just like a good actor, right? Like I'm good with accents. I think that's, maybe my ADHD brain or whatever, right? I'm good at accents. And sometimes when I teach, I'll go into accents. But like, I don't know what I'm saying if I'm speaking French. I don't even remember any of it really.
Well, so what's interesting there is that, so from a language teacher, because I'm a language teacher, and what I've
Mm-hmm.
told people is, and this is true in Japan, and I'm kind of showing my hand a little bit, where I've worked a lot of, there's been two languages, but the one language is called a dialect a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And so the island languages tend to get called dialects, and they're not really dialects. If you look at a language, what needs to be a language is if they're not, if something is a dialect, that means you can take person A from location A and person B from location B and put them in the same room. They should be able to be, yeah, 70% of the time they should be able to understand each other. That's
Mm-hmm.
being pretty generous.
Yeah.
Uh, but if you take person A and put them in person B and they're speaking dialect, quote unquote dialect, and the person B is speaking quote unquote main language, and that person B can't understand them, and person A can't understand person B, that means you have different language.
Gotcha.
What that means is if you learn two languages or have a kind of a mixed upbringing where you're maybe mom speaking one language, dad speaking another language, or maybe grandma speaking one language and speaking it to mom, and you're kind of passively learning it.
Mm-hmm.
Don't worry, folks, we're getting to karate in a minute, but I'm laying the track here a little.
Yeah, yeah.
If someone is able to pick up both very early or two languages very early, then a third language is very easy. And so what I
Yeah.
tend to tell people here, and what I've told people, is if these kids learn the language, their native language, not Japanese, but their native uh, local language, it's very
Mm-hmm.
close. I mean, grammatically similar
Right.
to mainland Japanese, also different in a lot of ways, depending where you are.
Mm-hmm.
Um, you will be able to get a third language in there, and you'll have more tones and more. Your mouth will be better exercised to learn something new. And
Yeah.
hands down, most of the time, the kids who are really good with not just spoken but also like intellectually, they can get their head around something new. Those kids who had more exposure to those two forms of speaking.
Right.
What does this have to do with martial arts? Well, very simply, going back to your Brazilian jiu-jitsu and karate thing, and sometimes this doesn't always work out, but I mean, a lot of times it tends to. If you have somebody who's learned like karate and they
Mm-hmm.
walk into a Brazilian jiu-jitsu school, yeah, they're going to be like, this is all new. But they've gone through the experience of learning karate, so it will
Right.
feel like learning karate again. They might get
Right.
frustrated or whatever, but they'll be learning.
Mm-hmm.
And the inverse is true as well. If someone's from Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and goes over to karate, right,
Yeah.
they'll be able to go down the same neural pathway, both physically and mentally.
Yeah,
So
definitely.
I think the language comparison there is sound. Sorry, I just kind of got wind on for a while there with that.
No, no, that's good. That's good. To the same point, like if you do some karate and you did some wrestling both as a kid, when it comes to then learning a different art, it's much easier.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. The art you do now, what you do now, is that what you did when you were a kid?
Me?
Yes, you. Yes, you, Dan.
Yes.
You.
Yes. Yes. I started doing Kung Fu when I was 10. Yeah.
So is it the exact same Tongsudo you learned when you were 10, or did you have to kind of change it up as you went along?
No, I mean, I think that, oh God, well, this is a whole different story. I mean, I switched organizations 2 times.
Okay, but
So,
so you kind of had a gray matter for a little while, and then going over to other things, you had to kind of shift
yeah.
gears. So,
But even
like,
even the one organization I was in for 20 years
right.
changed over time.
Mm,
So like I don't think it's impossible. And then I've changed, right? So like but even still, like, I mean, we would come in and oh no, it's different now. No, we're gonna do it this way now. So like that has happened, but I mean it hasn't been like a drastic change.
but that's
Yeah,
like
yeah.
kids saying, "Oh, shnikes," like holy shnikes, man. And it's like,
Right.
yeah, I mean, like we said, "Oh, shnikes" back in the '90s. You say that to kids nowadays that think you're cursing.
Right.
So it's a kind of the same thing with the language, where when people say, "No, no, no, this has been the martial arts since the late Middle Ages,"
Right.
yeah, sure, because we're speaking the
Yeah.
same language they did 100 years ago.
Right,
Um,
exactly. Good luck translating the old
yeah,
texts from even 150 years ago. Yeah.
holy shnikes. Did you remember saying that phrase back in the '90s? Because
Man. Shnikes, I don't think I ever really said shnikes. But like,
you heard people say
remember,
it though.
yeah, but you remember like people would go, psych, Like nobody does that anymore. Like stuff, all these little fad, things that people would say. Absolutely, they don't exist anymore.
And then how does that not translate over to what people physically do?
Right.
Right?
Right.
Stretches and fads and stuff like that people obviously picked up on.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And then that made its way into training.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
So I think the language and comparison is sound, but I am very hesitant to talk about analogy.
We have to be wary with analogies because they're only good to a certain point, right? Like you can make an analogy to make a point, but beyond that point, the analogy no longer suffices because they aren't the same thing.
Right.
They're similar, but they're not the same.
So there's content behind the analogy, right?
Yeah.
Generally. Like we're
Mm,
talking about martial arts as language, right?
yeah.
Okay, that kind of works. We're talking about native speakers of stuff like that, but anyone can become a native speaker,
Sure.
which is, I think, the biggest difference. You can see the language in somebody when they're trying. You can see an accent on someone when they're trying, right?
Mm-hmm.
But that comes out, and why language works so well as a comparison, or why like music gets compared to martial arts as well, is
Sure.
because it's very much of a skill based thing. We don't really
Mm-hmm.
think as language as a skill because we just use it to communicate all the time.
Oh, it
So it
definitely is.
becomes this like base thing that we have to master as bipedal humanoids, but
With monkey brains.
monkey brains.
No,
Yeah.
but
So
it is a skill. It absolutely is a skill. And music is the same. Like my son, we will be up at night at like 1 o'clock in the morning, and we'll have amazing conversations about music because that is what his specialty is. He's going to college right now for music education, and like the way that he thinks about music is the way that I think about martial. And so like we'll talk about the similarities and such for hours. It's fantastic. I think that there's a lot of really good cross comparisons. Like forms, if you know anything about music, forms are essentially etudes. If you do music, etudes are simple, not simple, but specific sets of it's a specific piece of music designed for practice. It's not a song. I think people like to think of forms as songs, but they're actually more for etudes. They're specific pieces designed to practice and develop specific skills. And that's what forms are. Forms are a specific set of movements to practice to develop a specific set of skills. And then you do a different form to develop a different set of skills, right? There's a lot of really cool cross comparisons to analyze there. But the purpose of music and the context behind music is not the same as martial arts. So
right.
there's a point where it stops being the same, and you have to treat it as its own animal.
Well, and so, but the interesting difference is there, and I don't know if this has been your experience, but it has been mine, where people make these comparisons, make these grand analogies between music or language or whatever, and then they'll talk about like they'll go on for hours about like this or that and the other thing, but then they'll show they'll be like have you work on a technique and a kata for hours and hours on end, and the end point of that lesson becomes, oh, and that's this technique, and they'll show the technique, and
Right.
that's it.
Yeah.
Has that been your experience? Have you like worked on a form or done something like that, and then like, okay,
Mm-hmm.
that's the technique, and then no practice, no comment on it, no nothing, whatever.
Right. Yeah. No. That is definitely an experience. It's either that or it's just simply we need to work on this. We need to work on this. We need to work on this, and that's going to make the judges go, ooh, like that's the point. right? Like it's never for the actual technique. You're not actually practicing the technique to get that skill. You're practicing that technique to get that technique, whatever that is, right? It either looks the way that they want it to look like, or it's used the way that they want it to be used, but only in that context that they show you. It's not about actually developing that skill. Whereas, like, if you're practicing music and you're practicing a specific bar, that's a skill that gets used within the whole of your repertoire. You'll be able to do it whenever. You'll be able to play that scale. You'll be able to play that chord. You'll be able to play that whenever, out of nowhere, because you have that skill. And I think that's a difference.
Yeah, well, like you would never have an instance where you're just playing that scale or you're just doing that, like you're just doing that drill, or for language or whatever, and then never, ever, ever try to do anything else with it.
Right.
I mean, I've been in
Yeah.
language classes where that's where kids get so frustrated with language is
Mm-hmm.
because
Mm-hmm.
they will, oh God, it's the passive voice all over again. And for whatever reason, so many language books in English want to force people to learn the passive voice. And I get it, but at the same
Uh-huh.
time, it's like you're not giving them any context in which to use this at
Yeah.
all.
I get that. Yeah.
Because
There
when do we
has to
use it?
be when
And we
we
get yelled at in college to not use it, right? So
yeah,
why are we recycling this problem?
that's so funny. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's fascinating, because even when you even if you were to do like the transitional movement in a form where it would be like like because passive voice, and correct me if I'm wrong, is almost like backwards, right?
Yeah, and so it's like saying you killed my father, right? That's active voice. Passive voice is someone in this room has killed my has murdered my father, or my father has been murdered by somebody in this room,
Yeah, it's like
right?
Yoda voice almost, right?
Yes.
Sort of, yeah.
So so
So
in that regard, it's like there's reasons for it, but
yeah,
explaining those reasons, and how I've normally explained those reasons has been like, A, you don't want to talk about the person, like the actual actor in the sentence, so the
yeah.
actual person doing anything with it is you don't want to talk about, or B, you're like Tom Brokaw and like you're making a news report or something,
Right,
which
right.
means that there's some generational cultural level to it that's forcing that to come filter down, which
Yeah. That
some people have attributed to forms, right? They've
yeah,
attributed forms as like relic of the past,
sure.
aren't relevant for that. And, there's been pushback, pretty much since that criticism has been made of being like, no, 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 no. There's a reason for it. There's a reason for it. There's a
Sure.
reason for it.
Sure.
And the creative, well-intentioned, but ultimately misled versions of that
Hmm. Well,
have,
like if we think about the passive voice, like if I were to do like a low block and a punch, but instead I'm gonna practice it as a punch and a low block, and let's just say like that is the passive voice of that technique. Like, does that actually teach a low block and a punch? Some people will use it like, okay, we're just gonna mix it up a little bit, and it's gonna help the technique get better. But if you punch somebody first, there's no need to block because you've already hit them. They're going that way. Like, there's no
right.
blocking. The punch is a response to parrying and neutralizing their attack. You now have an opening. Strike them, right? Like that makes sense. Why don't we practice that? Because that is the skill. That is what we want to be developing, right? But if you do like a transitional movement, right? Instead of doing an inside outside block and blocking here, you block here, and you strike them in the stomach here, and you block here, bang, like that. That's a different skill, right? It's not the same skill as controlling with this arm. It's now controlling with this arm and punching. It's the same technique, but it sort of uses that passive voice where you're trying to say, well, I'm gonna teach you how to do an inside outside block, but we're gonna do it by doing something else.
Thankfully, this is where the analogy somewhat breaks down,
Yeah.
because you don't recede in technique, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Normally technique is straightforward, Most
Yeah.
people, anytime people try to teach that type of stuff, they're kind of overlapping it, in my opinion.
Yeah.
I normally don't like to get too technical on here, but I mean, yeah, I would say like coming out right now and making a hot take. Uh, there are in fact certain instances where people go way too far in terms of being like, I'm creative with my techniques, and like, yeah, okay, let's get
Right.
somebody not getting in a. The best thing I think I ever learned was, and I learned this from, weirdly enough, actually not. Well, the best thing I learned from people I've trained with over the years is get away from doing one step sparring where it's literally one person taking a step forward in a stance.
Yeah.
Like breaking that mold and
Mm-hmm.
just letting one step sparring become free sparring to a degree
Sure. Sure.
where it's like you never do the one step almost.
Mm-hmm.
The one step
Mm-hmm.
sparring is the free sparring.
Yeah.
Though there's problems with that approach breaks the mold of what generally happens when you only have one step sparring, where they only can focus on that one technique. They only know how to do that from
Mm-hmm.
that person's right hand, or they only know how to do that in this certain way. They only know how to do that in that stance.
Right.
So
Oh yeah.
that's where I think
Absolutely.
that's where, as a language teacher, I would completely disagree and say you need to do one step sparring. But as a martial arts teacher, I would say let's let's not do this part because this part is largely unnecessary. It's not going to be how you move.
Yeah.
So I don't know if you would feel this necessarily the same way.
Well, I think that from a progressive standpoint, specifically in curriculum, I think
Right.
that there can be a point where, let's say you're brand spanking new, nobody's ever punched your face before, you have no clue what to do. Let's teach you these basic things, right? Somebody's going to step in and punch at your face. We're going to teach you how to move to the side. We're going to teach you how to block. We're going to teach you these things. But like my curriculum, there's only 15.
Okay.
After that, there's no more of that. Somebody's going to hit you, and you better just do whatever you do, and it better work. And if it doesn't work, you get punched in the face, or it's going to fail in some way, shape. So there's a progression to it. I have no problem teaching one steps to white, yellow, or like Q level, right? We call them gup in Korean. Color belts, right? I have no problem teaching one steps to color belts, but I never teach just one steps, even to the white belts.
Right.
Like this is some basic stuff, and we're going to test you on this, but also we're going to grab you and we're going to pull you around, and I want you to be able to show me that you can move, that you can coordinate your body in a way, because that is incredibly important. I would never just require one steps, even to white belts.
And that gets into questions of movement and balance and like can people like figure that out? And then
Yeah.
even teaching that incorrect, like just as a thing, not just the forms, but also just understanding balance, understanding your own body, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
That doesn't get, there's no formula anybody really has for that. You kind of have methods, but it's not
Mm-hmm.
really in curriculum. So you can have a ton. I've seen this a lot where those type of things aren't broached for people. Those kind of methods aren't really broached for people. So they learn curriculum, but they've never hit a bag and they've never figured out their balance. They've never figured out their center. They've never figured out,
Right.
any of that stuff. So
That's
it's
why
good
we
that
have
you
push
do that.
hands. Push hands does that incredibly in my experience. It teaches you, if you use your hip in a certain way, if you get stuck and thrown backwards, that was not an efficient way to move your hip. Like it's very easy to show that. So there are ways to do it. I think that just not in one step sparring, not even in forms. Forms don't teach it, not
Do
explicitly, because you're moving in space. You're not moving with resistance against your kinetic chain. So you're not going to learn where your center should be. You're not going to learn how to move your center efficiently, just by doing forms.
right. Well, not if somebody's not focusing on like a great example I love to use is like Nanahachi. Like once you're bent, you're always bent. Once you're
Mm-hmm.
on that level, you're always supposed to be on that level. Uh,
Right.
And people try to use that as a cudgel to, you have to figure out you have to figure out your knees. Bend your goddamn knees. And it's like,
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
all right. That's funny. That's a cute. That's like a fun thing you
Right.
do.
Right.
What everyone will remember that. It's like a military training type deal, but like
Yeah.
you're talking on a personal level, like it's not really going to teach him much.
No, no. And that's why, you have to have an instructor or somebody that's like, okay, I'm do that technique and I'm going to hit you or I'm going to push you or you're going to hit me or you're going to push me and I'm going to give resistance. And you either are going to fall off balance when you do this technique or not, because that technique is not designed to be done in a vacuum in space. It's designed to be done against somebody else. So a good teacher will go around and push on you and throw you down and do that to you because that's necessary. Sometimes then they'll do it only after you've finished the technique, right?
Yeah.
You get into a technique and then they come over and they push you and you're like, the technique's done.
Yeah.
I'm no longer I should no longer be stuck in this position. Like the pushing me while I'm stuck in this position doesn't actually help unless you're, in like a clinch sort of position and somebody needs to be moving you and you need to be stuck still. Like that's a different feeling, but that would be like I think that is a teaching tool that was brought by people who didn't like teaching. They like walking around and hitting you in the leg when you're in a stance and going, oh, stronger, like
Never helps. That never the
never.
people have now used that. Like, who wants that experience? Who needs that
Yeah,
experience? Like,
that's horrible
it,
experience. But if I'm walking down the line and I go, okay, I'm going to kick you, like we're practicing low blocks. Okay, I'm going to kick you in the stomach. Block my foot. Really, block my foot. That is a much better way of teaching that low block because then you will learn how to do it. You won't learn how to do a low block if you come down to that low block and I come over and I hit your arm.
stupidest thing I did very early on as a teacher, but I think I'd still do it today. Is weird thing to say, right? Is I would have students do punches in like Naihachi stance or like a horse stance or whatever,
Yeah.
and I'd be like, all right, and it'd be like their first day or whatever. I'm like, all right, hit my stomach. What? Yeah, hit my
Uh,
stomach. God.
uh-huh.
No, no, hit my stomach. No, hit my stomach. What are you doing?
Right.
Hit my stomach. And like
Right.
that kind of thing where it's like, yeah, you got to punch.
Yes.
You got to actually have a punch. You have to
Yeah.
know what it feels like to hit something.
Yeah.
The real reason for that is I didn't have any bags or anything on the head, so it was like, all right, got to give you something the first day.
Right.
Um,
No, I
but
do that. I do that.
yeah,
Because I certainly believe that somebody, they need to know what it feels like to hit another person, and they need to know what it feels like to get hit by another person. And I tell students all the time, if you want to hit somebody hard, you better be okay with getting hit hard.
yeah,
There has to be that balance. If you're not okay with me punching you in the face, then don't punch me in the face. But I'm going to punch you in the face, so you better punch me back, right? Like I want this reciprocity. Is that the right word? Reciprocity. That's right.
reciprocity would be correct.
All right.
Reciprocal relationship.
Yeah. Yeah.
This rapport. This
Yeah. Yeah. And that's why,
we can find a couple more R words in there, but
yeah,
later for you than it is for me. But I've had less
yeah,
sleep,
yeah.
so
But at the same time, if you have a brand new student, they've never hit anybody before, and you have them in front of the whole class, hit me. No, hit me harder. What do you think you are? Hit me harder. That can be demeaning to the student. And it
right.
may not actually help them hit you harder. It's probably going to make them not want to come back. So like there's some good parts about that and some bad parts about that.
There's ways in which you can do it that are more welcoming, and there's ways in which, and especially if like you kind of do the same thing for new students every time, everyone will kind of be on the floor being like, oh yeah, that.
Yeah. Yeah,
Um,
yeah. And then like, the older students will go up to them after class and be like, "You did great. We all had to do that at the same time." Like that happens. But like
Nobody
I
makes it
when
the first leap, not even you.
usually when I have a brand new sword student, because the most common way of holding a sword is like an axe, right? And so the thumb, it's just like gripping a fist. The thumb is
Right.
on the outside of the pointer finger, or whatever. And this is the wrong way to hold a sword. because it takes the range away from the weapon. So like I do this to almost all of my first time students, and I go, when I'm teaching them how to hold the sword, I put the sword on their shoulder and I hold it. I say, you see, I can hit you from here. This is very clear, and I touch their shoulder. I said, this is very clear. But if I hold it the way that you are and I swing it right in front of them, because the angle change of that
Right.
Kisaki is so drastic that you will miss them. And there's and they're like, and I go, do not hold the sword this way, because the purpose of a weapon is what? And they go, I don't know. It's range. That's why we sit in bunkers now and press a button and the missile goes over there. Like, the point of a weapon is range. If you're using a sword, use its range, So like that's, but I do that all the time. And people will always be like, oh yeah, he does
sword
it.
attack.
Yeah.
Guys are sitting in the Pentagon trying to figure out what the next thing to do. Launch the katana missile. But sir, that'll serve. I don't care. Launch the katana missile.
But yeah, I mean, but it's not the smartest thing to do, but I do it because it helps to kind of teach that lesson. But I mean, yeah, I think that if you're talking about language and you're talking about martial in some sort of way, or you're talking about music and you're talking about martial in some sort of way, even when you're teaching it, there are good ways to teach skill, and then there are ways to just teach memorization. And I think that is the biggest issue that I'm really kind of worried about, or not worried, but concerned about in general, because you have people that talk a lot about self-defense or combat sports or whatever, bunkai, and this word, and then they do these memorized patterns, and then they think that they can use it in a live conversation. And I don't think that is a real thing. I think that they will struggle.
I feel this is almost an issue of as old as time, but it's more exasperated today by just how much is out there.
Yeah.
And just kind of the sterileness of how people think they can learn something, as opposed to just how people have learned it before. And yes, there's ways of improving that, but not the way you think.
I think that curriculum in general, specifically martial curriculum, no matter what martial art you do, it's often second priority to other things. And I think that no matter if you want to teach something to a lot of people, then you run that risk of not having that ability to create a well-spoken speaker.
Right.
If that makes any sense. Like, I mean, like, there are so many people out there who teach, let's say, applications of forms, and they say, well, we don't like one-step sparring. We don't like these choreographed responses. So we're gonna do applications of these forms real. But when you watch them, all they're really doing is creating different choreographed movements, and all of their students or people who watch them on YouTube or wherever they get their input from this person who's putting out these applications, they all look like them, because that's the only way that they can learn that, is to copy and mimic, because the choreographed movements are just memorized.
Now, Dan, are you saying people need a live teacher and not a videoed?
I don't mind video as a supplement, but like, even like, if I teach people via Zoom, but I'm able to like pick and move them and make sure that they I'll put them into a position to go, yeah, push here. Does that, you feel like that doesn't work? Okay, I just turn the hip a little bit. Like there are
You're in a
ways that you
live
can,
position.
right. But, but I see people who are in live positions or even in the same room as some of these teachers, and all that they just look just like them because all they do is copy the drills that the person is making you memorize.
Yeah.
Because this is the applications of the form. So we're going to memorize these. And they're all choreographed. This person is going to punch me like this. This person is going to do this. This person is going to do this. And that, so like it, even though that person may say, I don't want to create copies of me, but they do.
You're ultimately going to have to deal with that, but then like eventually people are going to have to learn to speak on their own, which is it's just a bit of a different problem.
So like
But
from a linguistic standpoint, how do you get from there to there? How do you get from that person who's learning how to speak with a teacher and then they become a speaker? Where's that gap? How do you bridge that gap?
well, from my perspective, it is very much like where are they going to use it? Where are they going to use it in? From the martial arts perspective, it's like, all right, that person doesn't pursue anything else in martial arts and they just stay in that place. Yeah, they're not going to really. They're going to go as far as that place is going to be able to take them.
Mm-hmm.
If they try to pursue something outside their own, eventually it's going to end up different.
Yeah.
If they start talking to other people, they start doing other martial arts, they start going to other things, they can start pursuing other interests, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which most people do. That's going to end up making that look different. You're going to end up with a speaker
Right.
of something.
Right.
It won't be what necessarily that is, or they might cling to that and say, this is how it is. Because you get language learners who cling to kind of parts of lessons that they've learned or parts of words that they've learned. I do this all the time, where it's like, this is what I know from this, rather than trying to update myself, which is a bad thing from a language learner's perspective as opposed to a language teacher's perspective. But you go with what you're comfortable with, right?
Yeah.
So if you're
Yeah.
comfortable with what you've copied from that teacher, right, you're kind of going to always going to back up into that.
Yeah.
Just unless you completely rewrite the book with yourself, which people do. So
Sure.
people
It
change over
happens a
time.
lot.
So
Yeah. Yeah, and it's funny too, because like let's say you do karate for 10 years and then you go and become a security guard, or you go and become a bouncer at some club, and then you end up actually using these things in a real life situation. I usually hear these sorts of people saying, "Oh yeah, I used this." But if you were to like ask them to show you some things the way that they did it in that bar, it's not the same. They
yep.
used it, so like there's that gap where somebody is learning the thing and then they use the thing. There's a gap there, and that thing I think is immersion.
Yeah. Experience.
Experience.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that's how do you put that in a karate curriculum? I don't know if you can. Can you?
I feel that's a possible separate conversation.
That is a great. Yeah, we need to do this again.
No. Are you saying, Dan, is this saying you're going to become a regular guest?
Let's do it.
Yeah. Cool. Because I know I don't want to cut too much into the time because I know it's getting down late for you and you got the kit and caboodle on the farm.
Yeah.
So one question I'm going to ask you before we get out:
Okay.
what are your training plans for the next week or so?
Next week or so, I am going to be focusing on primarily internal work. With my daughter back into school and me having to wake up earlier now, I need some mental discipline to be able to go to sleep on time and wake up on time. I'm also going to try, because I was listening to a podcast about sleep and the neurology behind sleep. And one thing that he talked about was setting your clock. And the best way of setting your clock is actually to wake up within an hour or two of sunrise and actually go outside and get like 5-10 minutes of sunlight to actually hit your retinas, because you have like these, I forget what they're called. You have these cells in your retina that actually decide when later to create melatonin. So like, so I'm trying it. He says that, one thing he says, it might take like 2 or 3 days or whatever, but it should kick in really well. So like, I'm going to try, because I got to wake up at like 7 a.m. now. I'm going to try for the next week. I'm going to give it a week, and I'm going to try to see if it will make me want to go to sleep earlier. Because like I said, I am a night person. I will go to sleep at 2 a.m. because I'm just awake. So we'll see. We'll see if it works. That's going to be part of my training schedule.
Biorhythm is a tough thing. I get that. I'm in
Yeah.
the middle of a move, so my body was just like exhaustion adrenaline till 3 a.m. and then 7 a.m. or 3 a.m. and 7 a.m. adrenaline hit. Like my eyes open, I saw a little bit of light. I'm like, okay, you're up. Go. Go. You have no energy to do anything, but you got to get everything done.
Yeah.
So
I feel you.
That's that. But cool. Well, Dan,
all right, brother.
Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank
Hope
you.
we get to do this again sooner than later. It's great having you on the podcast proper, rather than some weird streaming thing that we're somehow able to do, but sometimes not. No, just do what we know.
Yeah,
cool.
Yeah. No, well, thank you. It's an honor. I'm excited, and I can't wait to be on again.
Cool. All right, my friend. Thank you so much, and everyone, don't forget to keep training.
Peace.
It's okay. I panicked there for a second. It was like, oh my god, did the recording not go? No, it's all right.
All right.
No, you're good. You
Yeah.
got little ones.
Yeah.
You got
Yeah.
a
I'll
loving
probably have to.
family and a community and all that good stuff. I'm like a man with a man with a bottle. Um,